Welcome to the pre-show, everyone. You're joining us live here for the Security Plus study group. If you're watching this in the replay, you're about 10 minutes early, except it's a replay, so you're not really early, you're really late, and you're much more than 10 minutes late. Regardless, you could skip 10 minutes if you wanted to, but then you would miss all of this, whatever this is. I'm not sure what this is. This is me getting ready for the study group to begin, which is in about 9 minutes and 30 seconds. We've got, I should probably click to put the bar at the top of the website. That has been done. Got that out of the way. Let's make sure the live, I don't think I updated the chat on the live page. That will be a problem. So if you're on the live page live, you don't see a chat there. Where's the chat? Where did it go? What happened to it? Well, I didn't put it there. See, I haven't done this in 2 weeks. There's bound to be other things I have forgotten about. Trust me, it has been a crazy 2 weeks for me. This is the only normalcy I think I've had in the last 2 weeks. That's not entirely true. That's mostly true. That's pretty much true. It's just been hectic things. So now we kind of pushed back the study group. Now, if you're on the live page, you can refresh, and I will look at it myself to ensure that indeed the chat is there, and it is. So now if you are on the live page and you're not seeing the chat, you're wondering where did that chat go, you can now refresh and it will magically appear at the bottom of the page. You can also go to the chat directly, bottom right-hand corner of the website. You can click on the Students Online. At the very top is a live event chat. It's the same chat. It's the same chat that's embedded in the page. And of course, you can pop that out and do other things as well. Let's make sure that we've got everything ready to go here. My Touch ID is no longer working. I have broken my iPad again, I guess. I'm assuming. That seems to be what's happened. That's another one of those things I'll have to fix someday. It's too bad. What else we got? I've got the stream is going. That's good. I've already done the intro for the podcasts. So you missed that. That was a lot of fun. It was me just talking. I already did the camera check, so we don't have to do that. It's this thing where I have to do this and do that one, do this one, do that one. So that's what that's about. And they still work. We were supposed to do this study group last week. We were supposed to do it exactly a week ago, and we did not. So we pushed it to this week. This was supposed to be my week off. Not so much. We'll do this. And then next week, we're rolling right into October and doing the A+ study group next week. So we're back on schedule. We're back again. So who thought we wouldn't be here? I thought we wouldn't be here. I didn't know what we would be doing. Oh, my graphics are way wrong on that. I wonder why I have that set that way. I'm looking. You can't see it. Up above me in this picture is a very large, like 55-inch television. And I'm looking at it. What effectively is the same thing that's on this tiny little TV that's to my left. It's not really a TV. It's more of a monitor. It's a professional monitor. It's professional. So that's how we do things here, is professionally. But it's one that is set up to show me exactly the same thing. And I'm noticing I have graphics on here that are from July, thinking that should not be there. But it's too late now. I'm not going to change it. If we get July's graphics, that's the way it's going to go. We're not going to. I won't hit that button. I was probably trying to do something a little askew, a little weird, a little unusual, and apparently was successful, because that's not supposed to be there. But I'm not going to touch it because everything else seems to be working right now. Actually, it's on a separate, what they call DDR. So the DDR that is set up properly for the lower third that I will be using is DDR1. For some reason, the July slide is on DDR2, but I never go to DDR2, and there you've already got way too much information about the way this thing works. So I'm not sure. Yep, but we've got the Q&As ready to go. You'll find everything you need at professormesser.com/live, links to the Q&A, interactive live Q&A. We will do all real time. Watch the things. In fact, I've got it on my screen. You can kind of see it. Why don't I click the link so you can see what people are answering, so I can see in real time what people are choosing. It's a question from last month, so you'll be able to do that. Has anybody shown up? I guess that's the real question. Yeah, you're here. I'm looking at the analytics. You made it. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Could not do this without you. Well, I could do it without you. It would not be any good. That's the difference. 4 minutes and 40 seconds to go until we get this party going. We've got a lot of questions to go through. I did these questions 2 weeks ago because I planned to do them last week and we pushed this off a week. So I did that, and now I don't really remember them that well. I went through them this morning, though. I was at least conscientious enough to forget how to speak, to be able to go through those. So I did go through them, and they look fine. I went through the questions like, oh, I remember that from 2 weeks ago that I wrote, because I write all of these questions are written brand new. These are brand new questions every month. And I write every single one of them. I usually write the questions on Thursday or Friday after the previous study group. So I kind of roll them up. I kind of get them ready. So right after we're done here, the video is automatically made available. And then I start work on the next week's pop quiz questions for A+ and Network Plus. And then I write all of those out. That takes about half a day. And then I write the Q&A for next week's study group if there is one. And that usually takes half a day. So that's where we are. And now here we're here. I just don't remember any of that. It's all a blur from 2 weeks ago. We are just over 3 minutes away. 3 minutes and 10 seconds away from getting started. Hello, Rhode Island, and Mexico. Welcome, Mexico. This is one of those things where we get folks from all over the globe. And you're there in the chat room. The chat room I'm watching, you'll notice that if you're watching this on YouTube, there's no chat room there. There's not that fancy YouTube chat room because I don't like that chat room. The chat room I use is way over on the website, professormesser.com/live. You'll need to make your way over there. We've got Mississippi checking in, San Marcos, California, Ireland. Very nice. Hopefully you'll be able to understand what I'm saying because I know that it's different languages. That's the problem. Phoenix is here. Lancaster Pa. Lancaster Pa is here. My Pa is here. The South, we don't really do Pa here in the South, although that's what I always see in the movies. Hey, Pa. I think maybe that's further north. That's the north part of the South. Maybe that's what that is. Baltimore is here. Namibia, welcome. South Bend, Indiana, Bowie, Maryland. A lot of DC, Maryland. So we got that. Yes, the chat is disabled on YouTube. You are correct, sir. Got to go to professormesser.com/chat to do that. St. Louis, welcome. Welcome, welcome. Texas made it. South Carolina, worried about you guys. Checking in with you guys. After we did our 2 weeks ago before the storm is when we did the last study group, and then all that nonsense happened. Oregon, where I used to live, South Florida, Fort Lauderdale checking in. I actually used to live in Miami Lakes, Miramar, Pembroke Pines. So I moved around a bit while I was down there. Oklahoma is here. This is great. So you're now here. I'm now going to have to do something. So there is that. We've got, yes, I was in Silver Lakes. I moved from the Miramar I moved from the Pembroke Pines part of Silver Lakes to the Miramar part of Silver Lakes. It's exactly the same area, exactly the same living community, except it's in different cities. That's how big that living community was. So there you go. That's one of those. Honolulu, welcome. You guys really got it in the last couple of weeks too. Boy, these storms have been really bad this season, and we're nowhere near finished yet. So who knows how this is going to go. 30 seconds, we'll get it started. Colorado is here. Chicago, they made it. How you doing? And Dublin, Ireland is here as well. This is great. Why is Ireland suddenly showing up? Bolivia's here. So I'm going to talk very slowly and succinctly. Not necessarily for Bolivia, but maybe for Dublin. Maybe that's my biggest problem is the brogue. Figuring out the language nuances. When I was had the same problem when I was in Scotland, trying to figure out all those things. So we'll figure out the details. But it's top of the hour. It's time to start. We should get this thing going. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 2018 Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group here from your friends at Messer Studios. My name is James Messer. I'll be your host for this next hour of live interactive Q&A, assuming that you've made it here live to watch this Q&A. I'll be asking you questions specifically from the SY0501 Security Plus exam, and hopefully you'll be able to answer those questions as well. And then we'll go through them. I'll explain why the question was right, why the other answers were wrong. You'll be able to go through all of this, and hopefully at the end of this, you may have actually learned something about the SY0501 exam. That's my goal anyway. Who knows where we're going to go with this. There is this entire study group, and the ability to do this study group is thanks to you. You're on my website watching the absolutely free videos. For those of you not familiar, all of my Security Plus videos are available for you to watch absolutely free. These are not behind a paywall. You don't have to register. There's no extra give me your name and email address nonsense. You simply watch them. It's an entire course, every minute of every video. I hold nothing back. There's nothing behind a paywall. There's no secret videos somewhere. You get everything. I cover every single topic from the SY0501 Security Plus exam objectives. So hopefully that's something you're able to use. Some people like to have an offline version of this course. The online version is absolutely free. If you'd like to buy an offline version, I have them available for sale. You can go to professormesser.com/getsecplus. This includes not just a physical version, if you care to get that edition. The physical version has a USB key that I send to you along with a physical version of my course notes. So those come along with it in the package. There's also a digital version. So if you don't want to pay all of that money and you just need something right now you can download, you can buy the digital version as well. professormesser.com/getsecplus. Maybe the videos I have, they're so secret that not even I know about them, which in any case, we're both fine in that regard. This is also information you can find out on my Twitter feed at professormesser.com/Twitter, and perhaps even more importantly, YouTube, professormesser.com/YouTube, so that you can see all of the new videos and all of the Security Plus videos and all of the playlists. They're all out there. In fact, all of the Security Plus videos I have and every video I've ever made all the way back to the beginning of this. So you can go back to the SY0301 Security Plus exam. I don't recommend you do that. That was a difficult time. It was an awkward phase that I was going through. Of course, if you like to take a replay of this, you can watch it on my website at professormesser.com, the whole video, audio nonsense that you're seeing here. But some of you like to have it in an audio-only form, a podcast form, that you can then have automatically downloaded into whatever podcasting, catching, listening program you like. You can find that RSS feed at professormesser.com/podcast. And you'll be able to add my A+ study group, my Network Plus study group, or my Security Plus study group. We have thousands of people that have subscribed to that podcast. Thank you so much. It's another example of having something available that you can use to make all of those things as you're trying to figure out, how do I get through this Security Plus exam? Because it is not a simple exam to get through. Hopefully this is yet another thing that can help you. Let's get to the details of what we'll be talking about today. Everything we're going to talk about comes directly from the SY0501 exam objectives. This is an exam that was released in October. So it's been out almost a year now. October the 4th, 2017. It's been out almost a year. I can't believe it. It's a single exam, so you don't have to take multiple exams to earn your Security Plus. If you take and pass the SY0501, you're certified. That's it. It is a 90-minute exam. You could get a maximum of 90 questions. It could, of course, be fewer than 90 questions. The passing score you need to get is a 750 on an odd scale between 100 and 900. I think they intentionally make it difficult to understand. You will be presented with multiple choice questions, which I think a lot of us are already familiar with. Choose A, B, C, or D, one of those types of things. But you may also be asked a number of performance-based questions. It's what CompTIA calls them. Performance-based questions are really any question that isn't multiple choice. That's how CompTIA defines it. So it could be fill in the blank. It could be a matching question. It could be a drag and drop. It could be putting things in a particular order from highest to lowest or slowest to fastest, those types of things. And the chat room, people are already saying, do you have an example of that? Yes, every single study group I do, the very first question is a performance-based question. So we are about to do a performance-based question. Stand by, and you'll be able to experience that right now live as we're doing it. Amazing that you even set me up for that one. The way that you're going to answer this question and all of the subsequent questions are on professormesser.com/QA. So this takes you to a website that has a lot of details on what you need to do. Really just takes you to a page. This is called Socrative. It's a third-party service that we use. I put all the questions in there. You simply need to go to the page, professormesser.com/QA, and you will be able to see the questions, and then you just stay on that page, and they will automatically update the page when the new question is available. Now, if you're using the Socrative student app, that's the one that you would want to download from your favorite app store, it may ask you for a room name. That room name is Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. So all of those one word, and you're good to go. You'll be able to see the question as it's waiting for you. In fact, there's a question waiting for you right now. It's actually a question from last month. But I'd like to put this in here to see if everybody is connected, that you're able to see everything that's there. Here is the question. This is one that is a long question. So let's read through it. A system administrator has recently installed a new application for the accounting department. The following week, a 0-day vulnerability was identified with the application. The application developer has issued a statement that a patch should be available in 3 months. What vulnerability type is this? This is the type of question, by the way, the wording of this question, that's very similar to the exam. You'll find that it's not a simple, give me a definition of a hash. That's not what they do. They ask a lot of detail in the question. So you have to read through them very quickly, grab the information you're looking for, and then be able to answer them. Now, if you go to professormesser.com/QA, you'll find this is a multiple choice question, which A is embedded system, B is end of life, C is improper input handling, D is lack of vendor support, and E is misconfiguration. So you get to choose between A and E and see which one it happens to be. And if you look at A through E, you will see we've got a number of people that have already answered D, lack of vendor support, 75% of you. All the other options, single digits, by the way. Well, there we go. Double digits just appeared for A, embedded system. 7% said improper input handling, 5% said end of life, and 2% said misconfiguration. And in a case where you've got an application, you've installed it, and suddenly a type of vulnerability has been identified, and the vendor says, yeah, we'll get to it eventually. We'll get this. How about 3 months from now? How about that? It's a 0-day vulnerability. Maybe you should get to that maybe faster than 3 months. That would be great. I would qualify that as a lack of vendor support. The vendor needs to be able to fix and repair and solve these critical security vulnerabilities as quickly as possible, especially a vulnerability that suddenly appears out of nowhere. A good example of lack of vendor support are the folks at Train that 3 vulnerabilities were found in April of 2014. They patched one a year, two of them a year later, and they patched one the January after that. So it took almost 2 years to get these vulnerabilities patched. That's not a situation you want to be in. And indeed, the folks that answered D, lack of vendor support, absolutely right. That's what that is. The vendor's not being very responsive and having those things available. It's not an embedded system problem. In fact, you're the one that installed this application for the accounting department, probably on a server. There's nothing unusual about that, and the system is not an embedded system. You have full access to the application and the operating system that it runs on. End of life? No, they didn't decide to end the life of that particular application. You just bought it. That would be a shame if they end of life the application as soon as you bought it. In this case, the application's still active and they're still doing support, just not very quickly. It's not improper input handling. You're not giving it an input issue, or at least nothing about this question says that the vulnerability has anything to do with input. So that's not the issue. And a misconfiguration. It's not your fault There's a vulnerability. That's a 0-day. It's part of the app. The app developer has to fix it. So that would indeed be lack of vendor support. So if you answered lack of vendor support, which would be option D, then you got that one absolutely right. So now you've seen the process for getting to the questions that we have online, answering them. You just need to stay on that page. Don't touch a thing. I will take care of moving these around as we go. As I mentioned, I like to do a performance-based question as the first new question of the study group. And this first question is indeed a performance-based question. As I mentioned, these are not multiple choice. Sometimes they're fill in the blank. They might put you at a command prompt and ask you to perform a particular function. They may have you do a matching. They may have you put things in a particular order. The question I have for you today is a performance-based question that is a matching question. So hopefully this is one that you will be familiar with. And this one deals specifically with different devices. This question asks you to match the device to the description of the device. So let me first give you the 5 devices. They are number 1, VPN concentrator. Number 2 is a switch. Number 3 is a SIM. Number 4 is a DLP. And number 5 is an HSM. So those are your 5 devices. Now, if you think these 5 devices match the descriptions perfectly, you can simply, as you'll notice, this is a fill in the blank. You can put 1A, 2B, 3C, 4D, and 5E if you think they are matched up perfectly the way they are now. They are not, by the way. They are not 1A, 2B, 3C. That'd be way too easy. A, B, C, D, and E, here's your descriptions of these devices. A, prevent the transfer of credit card data. B is correlate event logs. C is encrypt network communication. D is private key backup location. And E is segment the network by VLAN. So let's run through these one more time as you're going through the paces. Number 1 is VPN concentrator. Number 2 is switch. Number 3 is SIM. Number 4 is DLP. And number 5 is HSM. And our 5 descriptions are A, prevent the transfer of credit card data. B, correlate event logs. C, encrypt network communication. D, private key backup location. And E, segment network by VLAN. Those are our 5 matching. You'll see there's 5 numbers and 5 letters. So it's a 1-to-1. We're not doing any of this weird 1 less or 2 more or one of those things or multiple descriptions. No. It's 1-to-1. We need a 1-to-1 matching for all of these. So as you're putting these in, I'm seeing the answers come through on my side. Let's see if I'm seeing these the way I would think. A lot of you are doing pretty well with this. Some of you may have switched a pair of them, because if you switch one, you're obviously switching another one. So there may be a pair of those details to get that done. Your folks are doing pretty well at this. A number of you are Googling these names of these devices. I can tell. I know the number, how fast the numbers should be incrementing on my side, and they're not incrementing very quickly. So you're trying to figure this out. I recommend you try to do this as if this is the first time you've seen an exam. You don't have Google available to you. You're sitting in the exam room. There's no resources available. See how well you can do with this. See how well you can really make that happen. See, other people are telling me, yeah, you're right. I am Googling it. I know. I can feel it as you're coming through. Or take a guess. On your exam, you should absolutely take a guess. You don't want to be in a situation where you leave any of these questions blank. You aren't penalized for guessing. You are penalized, well, not necessarily penalized, but you don't earn anything if you leave it blank. So you might as well just guess. And I know that some of you put these in and then you don't remember what answers you put in because it doesn't show you once you submit them. That's sort of a quirk of Socrative. But now we'll go through these. Maybe you can remember. So let's match these devices to the description. We'll start with 1 VPN concentrator, and that matches up with C, encrypt network communication. The virtual private network concentrator is exactly what it does. It is usually a purpose-built appliance, and that device is designed to send and receive encrypted communication over these encrypted tunnels to devices or other endpoints that are somewhere out there on the network. The idea being if somebody was to get in the middle of that conversation and capture these packets, they would have nothing to view. it would all look like scrambled nonsense, and they would have no way to decrypt that data. And that is a VPN concentrator that is able to make that happen. The reason we use that purpose-built appliance is that process of encryption and decryption, especially at a centralized point, is usually done in hardware to be able to maintain the proper speeds. Because encrypting and decrypting data, there's a significant CPU overhead associated with that. So hopefully that's one where you've run into those situations and you now know, yes, that's exactly as you step through those, what you should be doing. Let's look at the second one, which is switch. Switch is matched with E, segment the network by VLAN. Segmenting by VLAN, a very common way to segment the network, not only for managing different areas of the network. For example, the marketing department could be in one VLAN, the IT department could be in one VLAN, and shipping and receiving can be in one VLAN. So there's that perspective of just keeping things organized, but also there is a security component to this. By segmenting by VLAN, you're preventing some devices from communicating to other devices. You're able to put something in the middle, often a firewall, between VLANs that can route traffic, but only the traffic you want to route, and only from the places you would want to route it from, and only the places you would want to route it to. Very common for companies to put a firewall between VLANs, especially important VLANs that may be in a data center, for example. Well, the next one is a SIEM. That's an odd little set of letters, SIEM. This security and event management device allows you to correlate event logs. It is generally a very large storage facility that receives syslog information from multiple devices, from switches, from routers, from firewalls, from servers, from workstations, from anything you'd like. Pulls all of these logs back to a central place and allows you then to begin correlating and viewing reports on this information that has been received. So you're able to get details about firewall logs. You're able to see who authenticated into the network. You're able to see IP addresses that were received. All of this is stored in this SIEM device. So if you chose B, correlate event logs, you match that one up correctly. Number 4, DLP, the data loss prevention. Now, if you know what DLP stands for, it might help you know that the matching letter was A, prevent the transfer of credit card data. DLP devices are commonly used to prevent the transfer of sensitive information. This might be credit card information, it might be healthcare information, it might be social security numbers, anything that is sensitive. You do want to be very careful about sending that out over the network. And if you're in an organization that is responsible for transferring credit card information across the network, there's a number of different requirements you're faced with, and having a DLP appliance in your network is one of those very common requirements. So a data loss prevention device can indeed look for credit card data. There are a number of algorithms that can be used to determine if a series of numbers are a credit card, and then it can block those or alert or provide you with notice that that information was being sent across the network. And then lastly, an HSM. An HSM is a place you can put all of your private keys. Being able to have the HSM on your network allows you to store your private keys, especially if you have a number of different web servers. You might have 100 or 1,000 web servers. You can store all your private key information in one secure place rather than having those private keys on these relatively less secure web servers out there in the world. So this is another way to help protect and prevent anyone from gaining access to that private key information. And the HSM is also commonly a purpose-built appliance. It's a hardened device that only the appropriate people would have access to. So hopefully this is something where you've been able to match up those devices to these descriptions. You'll notice that I didn't put the acronyms of these things up here. The important thing to know about these is not necessarily what the acronym happens to be. You want to be able to instead know what this device does. So this is a good example of taking it another step, doing more than just recognizing what that name is, but indeed how it happens to be used in the normal workings of a secure environment. So hopefully that's one that you were able to get right. The answers again, 1C, 2E, 3B, 4A, and 5D. So hopefully that is one that will help you as well. By the way, this comes directly from my SY0501 videos, section 2.1, the video name Security Components. If you didn't get any of those right, you can go to that video, Go through that video and you'll be able to find all the information you need about all of those different devices, and I summarize it maybe better than what I did here. We don't have a lot of time on our live study groups. And of course, you can always, in our second hour, I open up the phone lines. I take questions from the chat room. If there's other questions you have later, we're absolutely able to do that as well. I'll answer whatever question you happen, almost any question that you happen to have. Let's do another Security Plus question, though. I've got a multiple choice question. Are we ready? I think we are. Let's do that. This question is one about handprint readers. The question is, a company has added a handprint reader to the data center entrance. Which of these would best describe this authentication method? Would it be A, something you do, B, something you know, C, somewhere you are, D, something you are, or E, something you have? So this is clearly a authentication question, isn't it? So that's one of those we run into. So companies decided to put a handprint reader added a handprint reader to the data center entrance. Which of these would best describe this authentication method? It's something you do, something you know, somewhere you are, something you are, or something you have. Now, if you think you know the answer, please don't put it in the chat room. You want to instead go to professormesser.com/QA. And you'll be able to answer this question right now. In fact, I'm going to take a quick sneak peek that you can't see and see if a number of you are familiar with this one. As we are going through all of these, we'll figure out the details. This is, by the way, a very common thing to see at the entrance of a data center is a handprint reader. It's not at every data center entrance, but I've been to, I don't know, hundreds of data centers in my professional life. I used to be a systems engineer that did security, networking, and I would travel every day to multiple locations, multiple data centers, and talk to the network and security professionals. And I got to see a lot of great data centers, a lot of really cool technology, and it wasn't unusual to find handprint readers right at the entrance of the data center. It's just more and more common these days, it seems. Let's see how we did. I think a number of you have answered this one already, so we can click the button on how do we do, and you can see that 70% of you said D, something you are. The next closest was E, something you have, which was 14% of you. 11% said somewhere you are. 5% said something you do, and only 1% said something you know. So if we go to the vast majority of you have chosen, I don't say vast majority of you, but certainly majority of you. You've got 69% of you, 70% of you that said something you are. Something you are. So the real question is, how do you determine if it's something you are or if it's something you have or somewhere you are? Well, let's first look at the type of authentication method that's being used here. It's a handprint reader. It's effectively a biometric device. It's looking at who you are. And this is something, by the way, you can't change. You're not going to change your hand. Well, I guess you could. Technically, you could change your handprint. It would be very dramatic. You don't want to change your handprint. But your fingerprint, you can't change your fingerprint. You can't change your handprint. You can't change the way your iris is. You can't change your voice, at least not easily with any of these things. So if you want to prove that you are who you say you are, because nobody else has your handprint, nobody else has your fingerprint, nobody else has the makeup of your iris. These are all things that are very unique to you. So we categorize them as something you are. This is not obviously storing a picture of your hand. It's creating some type of mathematical representation of your handprint and then putting that into a system. So if you put your handprint back on those, it looks at, again, creates that same mathematical representation, compares with what it already has. So that's one that does come in. And as people are saying in the chat room, these are not 100% accurate or even secure in the way they operate. In fact, they're really used in conjunction with other types of systems. For example, the places where I've seen a handprint being used in a data center, someone would first use a proximity badge and beep into the door, put their hand on the handprint, and then put in a PIN. So there were 3 separate things going on there. There was something you had with you, something you have is your proximity card. There's something you are, which is your handprint, and then there was something you knew, which was your PIN number. So to be able to get into that room, all three of those things had to be in place. They weren't just using the handprint to do that. That's because it does become a bit of a challenge. There's a lot of challenges with biometrics. They're not 100% foolproof. And in fact, there's a lot of false negatives where you put your hand on it, it says, I don't know who you are. Like it's my hand. My hand has not changed. How do you not know who I am? So that's one of those. No, I never saw one that had a scale that measured if you were the weight of that person. Thankfully, I don't know how reasonable that would be for most people. I don't know if that's one we want to use for any of those. So if you did answer D, something you are, that's absolutely right. That's what we qualify a biometric as. It's something that you happen to be. It's not something you do. Obviously, you're putting your hand on a hand to have your hand scanned, but anybody can have their hand scanned. It's not like you're doing that to make the authentication work. The biometric is really what's happening behind the scenes. It's not something you know. Your handprint isn't something you know. You don't even know what your handprint is. So that doesn't work either. Something you know would have been the PIN number, as I mentioned earlier, that someone would put in along with their handprint. Somewhere you are, well, putting your hand on there certainly means that you're where you are at that very moment, but the handprint scanner doesn't know geographically where you happen to be. There are authentication methods that do check your GPS coordinates, confirm that you're in the country, and only then allow you access. That is certainly a method of authentication, and that's one where you could qualify that to be somewhere you are. But a handprint on a data center door doesn't really have anything to do with where someone happens to be. In fact, we know where they happen to be right now. Everybody is where they happen to be right now because they're on that handprint reader in front of the data center door. And lastly, something you have. Well, I guess I do have my hand with me, but that's not what we're shooting for. Something you have would be something outside of your body. So it would be your proximity card, for example. To be able to beep into that door, that would be something you have. Something that you don't normally carry with you, like your hand. That's why whenever we get a code that's on your phone, that's something you have. You have your phone with you. Or you have the pseudo random number generator, that token generator with you. So that's one that does come in handy as well. So hopefully you answer D, something you are. That's what we're doing whenever we use our handprint on that data center handprint reader. Make sure that if you're not familiar with these, you go back to the SY0501 videos 4.1. The video on AAA and authentication is the one that you'll want to reference if you want to learn more about these particular topics. Let's do another multiple choice. We're going through these at a relatively slow pace today. Have I been off a week? Can we tell? Yes, we can. This next multiple choice question is, what backup type would require no more than 2 sets to perform a recovery? What backup type would recover no more than 2 sets to perform a recovery? Would it be A, full, B, sequential, C, incremental, D, sector-based, or E, differential? What backup type would require no more than 2 sets to perform a recovery? 2 backup sets. Hopefully that's one where you'll find that. That's whenever I run into those. You never know all of those different backup types. There are a number of backup types you do need to know for the Security Plus SY0501 exam. Make sure that you look through those and answer at professormesser.com/QA. Please do not answer in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room to find all of those things. So I think that's, whenever I run into those, it becomes very helpful to know all of the exam objectives. You should, of course, have that list of objectives. I always mention this at the end of the study group, but it's so important that you have that list of objectives because it tells you everything you need to know for the exam. People often say, what things do I really need to study? Everything that's listed in the exam objectives. It should be the first thing you download and start studying. It should be the last thing you reference before walking into your exam. That'll be your master checklist. Just go through the whole thing, finding all of those and the way they operate. So what backup type would require no more than 2 sets to perform a recovery? Let's see what you think. How do we do? Let's click the button. And 52% of you said differential. So we'll say Half of you have said E, differential. 22% of you said A, full. 15% of you said C, incremental. 11% said B, sequential. Only 1% said sector-based, which is a perfectly reasonable backup method. And technically speaking, would it really require no more than 2 sets? I could almost give you half credit there, but I sort of made that up as a type of backup. It's more of an imaging method. It's not really a backup type in that reference, although image is a way to back up. So I guess if you chose that, the 1% of you, I could even almost give you credit there, but it did say no more than 2 sets. So it was more than just one image to restore that piece of it, isn't it? So the real question is then, broken this out, is it really the 53% of you that said differential, or is it full, sequential, or incremental? So let's look at these 2 sets to perform a recovery. The one that's most often referenced and the one that is in your SY0501 exam objectives is differential. A differential backup is the one that is going to require no more than 2 sets to perform a recovery. You're not going to have 3 sets or 4 sets or 5 sets or 6 backup sets or more than 2 to perform a recovery with differential. Whenever you run into those scenarios, you'll know that it's no more than 2 because of the way differential backups work. The way a differential backup works is the first day, Monday, you have a full backup. Now, the reason full backup wasn't the right answer on this one is that time goes by. So, for example, you also do a backup on Tuesday. But on Tuesday, you only back up the things that were different. It's a differential backup. What was different from the full backup? So I'm only going to back up what was different from Monday. Okay, day goes by. We get to Wednesday. Again, on Wednesday, we're backing up what was different than the full backup. Now, that means I'm going to be backing up, effectively repeating what I backed up on Tuesday, plus everything that was changed since Tuesday. So it gets a little bit bigger on Wednesday, but it's a little redundant. See how I'm sort of repeating myself on Wednesday? I'm backing up Tuesday and Wednesday. So on Thursday, we do the same thing. We back up Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. So now Thursday is a little bit bigger than Wednesday, and Wednesday was a little bit bigger than Tuesday. And again, we're copying, we're repeating ourselves. We're backing up the same data that we backed up on Tuesday, the same data we backed up on Wednesday, and we're backing it up all the way through Thursday, which is everything on Thursday that was different from our full backup on Monday. Now that means if we need to, Friday gets here and suddenly they say we've lost everything, we need to restore from a backup, all I need is the full backup that we did on Monday and the differential backup that was done on Thursday. And we're done because that Thursday backup includes everything that was different from Wednesday and everything that was different from Tuesday. So that makes it very easy. You know you only need 2 sets to be able to restore from that differential backup. It makes it very easy to do that whenever you work through those different backup types. On my video, the video 5.6 application recovery, I go through all of those different types, the full backup, the incremental backup, and the differential backup. And I tell you how many tapes. I've got a graphic for those. You can step through how they work. It's all in that video. I try to do a lot of graphics in this latest series of the Security Plus exam. I added on quite a bit of graphics, as a matter of fact, because it's the way I think whenever I go through that. So hopefully that's one that can solidify for you what a differential backup is and how it operates. And indeed, if you did answer E, differential, the 53% of you got that one absolutely right. A full backup, assuming that I needed to restore immediately after the full backup, would indeed be only 1 set. But obviously, if we get into later in the week, which is the case that the example I gave you here, a full backup doesn't always require more or require only 1 set. A full backup may be useless once you get a day later. It doesn't help you at all, so it would not be a full backup. A sequential backup, I kind of made that one up. Not actually backup type. Sequential, maybe if you think of how we store things on tape, we store them sequentially, one after the other on our backup tape, but not a type of backup. So the 10% of you that answered B, I kind of threw you a curveball on that one. That was a trick answer. I'll admit it. I'll take the responsibility. Incremental backups are backups that take a little bit at a time. So an incremental backup, if we took our earlier scenario and Monday we had a full, Tuesday we had an incremental, Wednesday was an incremental above that. Thursday was an incremental above that. When we got to Friday, we would need the full backup in every single incremental backup we had done since that day. So we might need 7 or 8 different sets, or in that example, 4 different sets to be able to perform a restore. That certainly is not a case where we would require no more than 2 to perform the recovery. And sector-based, again, what is that? That's another one I sort of made up there. It's, I guess, sort of an image. If you do imaging of a drive, one of the options you have when you perform an image backup is to back up every sector exactly the way it is on the drive, even if there's no data on it. We're backing it up. We're backing up all the zeros along with everything else. Sector-based backup you can think of as an image. It's not really a backup type because you can't really easily do an incremental image of that. You would have to just take another image. There are ways to do incremental images. They are problematic and difficult, and that's why nobody does them. That's why everybody just simply does a new image, and then you have an image, a copy of that image sitting somewhere else. And then maybe after you do the image as your full backup, you perform either incremental or differential backups after that. So your best answer here, the one that really makes the most sense, would be E, differential. The 54% of you got that one absolutely right. Well done. Let's do another one. I've got another question here. This one talks about files that we've downloaded. The question asks, which of these would be the best way to verify that a downloaded file matches the original? Which of these would be the best way to verify that a downloaded file matches the original? Would it be A, SHA-2? Would it be B, ECB? Would it be C, 3DES, whatever that is? Would it be D, ECC? Or would it be E, RC4? Not sure I'm saying those right. I'm intentionally not saying them right. I know some of you are going to explain to me how security works. A is SHA-2, B is ECB, C is triple DES, D is ECC, E is RC4. Putting those letters in there along with it just complicates things, doesn't it? Which of these would be the best way to verify a downloaded file matches the original? Is it SHA-2, ECB, triple DES, ECC, or RC4? See, that's much easier to understand if you're listening on the podcast. Is it A, AAA? Is it B, ECB? No, that's just, is it C, CC, ECC? I can't keep track. That's not the way we need to do it. SHA-2, ECB, triple DES, ECC, RC4. One of those is going to be a great way to verify that a downloaded file matches the original. Hopefully you've seen this before. Some of you have in the chat room. Some of you have seen how you can do this and one of the ways to do this. In fact, one of the more common ways. One of the ways that I even mention in the video that explains this is from this. So what would, you downloaded a file, you want to be sure that downloaded file matches the original. How would you do it? Well, one of the best ways to do this is to create a hash. And a hash is really a very, very common way to get a unique set of characters that can only match that original thing that you were hashing, that original file that you were hashing, that original email, that original object that you were trying to match. It's in the hash. And a very common hash to use is the secure hash algorithm, SHA, SHA. This was one that was created by NSA, the National Security Agency of the United States. This is part of a very common standard with security in the U.S. called FIPS. That's the Federal Information Processing Standard. You'll very commonly see the security devices that you would acquire as part of the federal government must be FIPS compliant. It must be a device that has gone through FIPS testing. And so you'll hear that term quite often when you're dealing with federal government agencies in the United States. SHA-1 was one that was highly used. SHA-1 was a hash that was pretty popular. But there were a number of collision attacks published for this. And in hashing, you don't want to have a collision. A collision is when you take a hash of one object and you get the hash value. You take a hash of a completely different object and you get exactly the same hash value. You never want that to happen. That's called a collision, and that's bad. You don't want it. So instead of throwing out SHA completely, it was updated to SHA-2. And this is a 512-bit digest, much longer, much harder now to actually have any type of collision. And these days, SHA-1 sort of thrown out for government use. We don't really use that anymore. And so hashing becomes a very common way that someone can take a hash of a file, post the hash itself on the download page, and then you can download the file, perform exactly the same SHA-2 hash, and then see if it matches what is listed on the download page. It's a very good way to make sure that what you have downloaded really does match all of those things. And that's why the only hash that is on this page is SHA-2. That's the only one on this page. So if you answered A, which 68% of you answered A, SHA-2, you got that one absolutely right. In fact, most of you got that one absolutely right. ECB is a way to encrypt blocks of data. Only 2% of you chose that option. Triple des is a way to encrypt data, commonly seen on VPNs and IPsec tunnels. 10% of you chose triple des, but that's not a way to verify a downloaded file. It's a good way to encrypt the file as it's being downloaded, but that wasn't the question. ECC, another method of encrypting. Another one that would be useful for protecting the data as it's being transferred. It will allow you to create a key that would be used, public-private key that you could use for encryption. Only 12% of you chose that one. RC4, another encryption method commonly used on wireless networks, but other places as well. Only 8% of you chose that one. So all of the other options were ways to encrypt data, to protect data, to make the data confidential. That wasn't the question. We wanted to verify that a downloaded file is matching. One of the best ways to ensure that the information you have received is exactly the same as the information that was sent would be to compare hashes. If we're doing public-private key encryption, it would be a digital signature, which is an encrypted hash. So again, the hashing is the way that you would make all of these things happen. So if you did answer A, SHA-2, you got that one absolutely right. This comes from the 501 exam, My Videos, section 6.2 for hashing algorithms. You can go through there. You have to know more than just SHA for hashing algorithms on the exam. Make sure you go through the list of all of those to be able to use them. It's a very useful thing to have. And make sure you go through that list so that you know exactly what hashing algorithms, what encryption algorithms, the symmetric encryption, the asymmetric encryption, the block encryption, all of those things you need to know for your exam. It's a big section, a lot of new stuff in the 501 exam. Make sure you're very familiar with it. All of this data, by the way, is all in my course notes. Now, some of you just don't have time to go through every single one of these Security Plus videos, or maybe you would just like something that is a single, succinct, compact set of notes that you can use to study from. Once you've already gone through your book, you've already gone through all the videos, you've tried to take as many notes as you could, but you couldn't watch every video. I've already done that for you. I've taken all of the text, all of the graphics, all of the important things from all of my videos, and I've put them into these course notes. They're 94 pages long. This is probably the longest set of course notes I've ever created because the Security Plus exam, pretty big. It's a massive exam with a lot of detail in it. In fact, I have a copy right here on my screen. Here's the course notes. If you buy them, it's a PDF file. You download the PDF file immediately. Put that PDF file on all your mobile devices. Put it on your computers. So wherever you are, you'll be able to read through. There's the table of contents. And here I go through every video. I've taken all the text, even taken the graphics from every video to show you exactly how things like DNS amplification work. There it is. Denial of service. There's a denial of service detail. Principles of social engineering. And they're numbered too. So it's section 1.2, privilege escalation. And I go through all the details of privilege escalation. It's all in here. I put it all in there. It's all available at professormesser.com/securitycn, security course notes. There's also links on the website there. There's also, thanks to Mrs. Professor Messer, she said you need a physical version of this too, because she doesn't like PDF files to read from. She wants a book. So this is exactly the same as the PDF file. So you've got exactly the same information in it. It's got exactly the same DNS amplification and all the same graphics and all the same text. It's just a printed version of it. This is made from dead trees, for those of you not familiar with books. So it's all the same thing. It's full color. It's a beautiful book, actually. I use very high quality paper, all color, all detailed. This makes it very easy to read. Nice, perfect bind on it. It's a nice book. It costs a little more because it's printed and I ship it to you. But if you buy the book, I give you the PDF version for free. So you kind of get a little bonus there. You can download the PDF version immediately, and then in the mail, usually if you're in the continental US, you get it in about a week, sometimes longer depending on what's going on, but usually less than a week. You'll get that book, and it'll just show up on your doorstep, and now you have both of those to choose from. And it's another great way to support the site. I don't accept donations. I don't take money for nothing. I want to give you something for your hard-earned money. So this is another way that maybe this might help you with the things you're doing on your Security Plus exam. Thank you so much for your ongoing support with those Security Plus study guides. These course notes become something you can really go through and take care of that. For those of you asking in the chat room, what about Europe? I'll ship it anywhere in the world. As you're checking out, you'll see that the shipping costs are added to that. So if you're outside the United States, it obviously is going to cost you a little bit more for shipping. Yeah, I'll send it anywhere. I send books all the time to Europe, all the time, South Africa, Australia, to parts of Asia. That's fine. Glad to do it. Happy to do it. They ship everywhere, so why shouldn't I? Be glad to do it. Find out more, professormesser.com/securitycn. And if you're someone studying for A+, for your Network Plus, there's course notes available for those as well. And it's a great way to support the site. Every dollar of this goes back into keeping this whole thing going, and sometimes keeping those lights on is a challenge. Thanks so much for all of the support you give to the site with your purchase of these course notes and all of our products, really. We could not do this without you. I've got more questions for you, so let's do another one. Got one there and available. This another long question. So let's parse this out. Let's read through it and see if we can figure out the details. The question asks, a security team has received a report regarding a device on the externally facing network. The report shows that this device is running version 4.2 of a web server and that numerous unauthorized privilege escalations may exist in this version. Which of the following best describes this report? Would it be A, a port scan, B, a penetration test, C, a signature update, D, a business impact analysis, or E, a vulnerability scan? So now we have to parse out these long questions that show up. These are the types of long questions you will absolutely get on the exam, by the way. So let's go through this again. Is it, let's go through all these details. Is it a security team has received a report regarding a device on the externally facing network? The report shows that this device is running version 4.2 of a web server and that numerous unauthorized privilege escalations may exist in this version. Which of the following best describes this report? These are very common reports that you will receive as a security professional. Is this report an A, port scan? Is it B, penetration test? Is it C, a signature update? Is it D, a business impact analysis? And is it E, a vulnerability scan? Which one is it? Which one of these best describes this report? And there's that very important qualifier that you will see in many, many, many questions you get on your exam. Which of the following best describes this report? Because looking at this list of answers, I could choose two of these that could really, I could choose as what this report could be. So this would be one of those where, what would it be? But really only one of these best describes this report. And that is the real answer, is best describes this report. If you think you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA and you can answer right on that page. Please note asking or answering of questions in the chat room, figuring out those details, seeing exactly what the possible answers are, and stop Googling so much. I see you Googling. I can see it. The numbers here did go pretty quick though. Most of you did not Google this one. So that was one. This one, I think many of you may have received this report before. If you're in any type of networking or security role, you've probably seen a report like this come through. So let's see how we answered on this one. Let's click how do we do. Wow, 81% of you said E, vulnerability scan. Is this one where we all got it right, or is this one where we all got it wrong? Which one is it going to be this time? There's really single-digit answers for all the others. 9% of you said B, penetration test. 4% of you said business impact analysis. 3% of you said port scan, and 3% of you said signature update. And that's not how I thought this would go, actually. I thought most of you would choose a mix between E and a mix between A. but that's because I'm sort of adding on what I know of port scanners, specifically Nmap. And although I did expect a number of you to put penetration test as well. So there's really only one answer that best describes this particular report, and that's this report is a vulnerability scan, where someone has scanned a device. They were able to determine what version of a particular service is running on that device. First, they know what service is running on it. They know, well, there's a web server there. They ran the scan that determined what the version number was of that particular device. And then they told you if you're running that version, you could be susceptible to a number of known vulnerabilities. In this case, unauthorized privilege escalations. Now, they're not saying that we actually ran these vulnerabilities. They're not saying that we have now hacked into your machine. They're not saying that we have gained access to your system using a privilege escalation. They just said if you're running this version of this software, somebody else could perform an unauthorized privilege escalation onto this system. There's a very important delineation between identifying potential problems and actually exploiting those problems. And that's where you have to draw the line as a security professional over what it might be. These types of vulnerabilities could be a lot of different things. They could be a misconfiguration. They could be you're missing a type of security software, or it could be that a particular piece of software you're running has a series of vulnerabilities associated with it. So as we look through this list, vulnerability scan, the 79% of you that chose vulnerability scan, letter E, you're absolutely right. It's a vulnerability scan. It's not a penetration test, which was the option B, because the penetration test is one that you would have had to take advantage of that vulnerability. You would have had to exploit the vulnerability and show that this particular problem not only exists, I was able to hack in. That's a vulnerability scan with a penetration test added on top of it. So anytime somebody is actually doing an exploit, it's a penetration test. So in this case, there was not an exploit done. There was simply a warning that one could be possible, so B would not apply. I said port scan earlier, as I could have chosen port scan for this, but not in the most traditional way. A port scan, at its most generic, basic definition, is one that simply finds open ports on a server. These days, a port scan is one that goes much farther than that. In fact, if you've ever used Nmap and you perform a service scan with Nmap, you actually get exactly what this question asks. A service scan can tell you the operating system that's running on a machine. It can tell you the service that's running. It can find an open port number, tell you the service that's running on that port number, and then tell you the version of the service running on that port number without actually authenticating into the device. It's like magic in Nmap. And that, as people think of Nmap as a port scanner, but in reality, Nmap goes much farther than that. In fact, Nmap can go much farther than the description I just gave, because Nmap has an Nmap scripting engine, an NSE, where they use a programming language called Lua, L-U-A. Lua is one where you can create extensions to Nmap. So once it finds this web server and it finds version 4.2, you could have it perform exploits if you wanted it to. So in some ways, Nmap can even be taken all the way to the point of performing penetration tests. So that is one where you do run into challenges in trying to parse out what these things are. So when you see these terms on your exam, take the terms in their most generic form. If you see port scan, it's one that is really just referring to the ability to identify open ports. Leave it there. Yes, we know Nmap does more than that. They didn't say Nmap, they said port scan. So we can take a very generic approach to what that means. Take the very generic approach to what penetration test is. It would not be a signature update. A signature update is commonly done with antivirus or intrusion prevention products. They will go and download a new set of signatures because these devices identify vulnerabilities and viruses and malware based on known signatures. Has to download those signatures to be able to identify those. Your antivirus may be doing this every hour, but that is not anything associated with the question where we're finding versions of a web server. And then you have business impact analysis, where you're assigning an impact to the business. Usually it's giving you dollars that you have lost because a particular event occurred, and then we can associate that with the impact to the business. In this case, there was no business impact here. It's very technical. Here's a web server. It's running a particular version. This could be bad for you. That's a vulnerability scan. So if you answered E, vulnerability scan, got that one right. That was spot on. Well done. Let's get another question in before we run out of time. I've got one here. This one, and by the way, people in the chat room are mentioning this. This is important. As someone who has written a book on Nmap, someone who has been in an IT security role as a systems engineer, you never want to perform a port scan, a vulnerability scan, and especially not a penetration test on a network where you do not have permission. That is an attack. It is not even a question that it's an attack. That is an attack against someone's systems, and they could retaliate legally, technically. There are going to be many bad things that might happen to you for doing that. So make sure that if you are wanting to perform a port scan, wanting to perform a vulnerability scan, or wanting to perform a penetration test, you do it to your own systems, or you do it to systems on the internet that were specifically set up for you to do that. And there's plenty out there. Fyodor has, for instance, out on nmap.org, he has an IP address and a name that you could use to scan with Nmap if you wanted to. So you can test these things out. So make sure you make that happen. I have a great story of someone who performed a vulnerability scan on my corporate network and brought down an enormous phone switch with thousands of people connected to it, and brought down my business. Not my business, but the business I was responsible for. So you want to be very careful. That person was summarily dismissed and never set a step in that building ever again. So you want to be very careful of what you're doing. Let's get another question in before we run out of time here. This question asks, a system administrator would like to view the TCP handshake between a web server and a client workstation. Which of these would be the best choice for this task? Would it be A, ARP? Would it be B, Netcat? Would it be C, TCP dump? Would it be D, netstat? Or would it be E, traceroute? So we have a system administrator. The system administrator would like to view the TCP handshake between a web server and a client workstation. Which of these would be the best choice for this task? Would it be A, ARP, B, netcat, C, TCP dump, D, netstat, or E, traceroute? Got a few of those that we need to choose from. If you think you know the answer, please don't answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormester.com/QA, choose your answer, and I'll just watch those pour in. A lot of you are answering this one as we go. All of these answers, by the way, are command lines and utilities and functions that you need to know for your Security Plus exam. All of them are real. All of them are actual things. So I didn't make up anything here. There's no trick answers on this one. You just have to know what every single one of these happens to do and how they operate, and you'll be able to answer this question. Maybe you've captured the TCP handshake between a web server and a client workstation before. Maybe you've been able to see that. How did you get that? How did you acquire that information? This would be one where you could figure out those details and know what they happen to be. This one's relatively straightforward. The problem here is that they've kind of reversed the question. It's almost like answering 5 questions on this one, because you have to know what each one of these things is to be able to know if it does that or not. So that's why, in fact, I didn't put the obvious answers in for this one. This is one where you really do have to be able to do your homework to know what this happens to be. So how do we do on this one? A system administrator would like to view the TCP handshake between a web server and a client workstation. Which of these would be the best choice for the task? No majorities on this one. We're a little torn. 42% of you, though, that's the highest number, said C, TCP dump. 27% of you said D, netstat. 18% of you said E, traceroute. And then single digits, 8% said A, ARP, and 5% said B, netcat. So that's a challenge to be able to figure out what those are. We don't really have a majority. The highest percentage was 43%, though, C, TCP dump. I think you folks might be onto something with TCP dump. That is a very, very common way to capture network traffic directly from the command line. Very convenient to do. Very often, all you have is a command line. TCP dump is a very easy way to start gathering packets right there. It's very common. You'll see it on Linux, on Unix systems. It's usually just built into the operating system. It's already included. It's already added to the operating system you happen to be using, but there are versions available for OS X, versions available for Windows. In Windows, it's WinDump. But the process of capturing those packets is how you would be able to see the TCP handshake, the SYN, the SYN-ACK, and the ACK, that three-way TCP handshake, which has a lot of good information inside of it. And that's why there's more than just the SYN, the ACK, and the SYN, the SYN-ACK, and the ACK. You want to really be able to look at all of the details that are going back and forth. The only way to do that is to capture the packets. You can also, with TCP dump, apply filters. If you try to capture everything from my computer, you'd see all kinds of crazy nonsense. You'd see Google Drive syncing itself in the background. You would see Twitter updates. You'd see this live stream. You'd be able, though, with TCP dump to add filters. You could say, only show me information going to and from a particular IP address. And then it will only capture those packets. So not only knowing TCP dump, that it exists, but knowing how to use those filters becomes really useful. And I won't lie to you, whenever I have to do this, I'm always referencing that. I'm always going back to Google, like, how do I do this filter again? I just don't use this every day. Then, okay, that's how you do it. It's very simple too. IP equals, and then you're able to do the IP. You're able to save this information. So if you're someone who likes to pull this into Wireshark and view it in a Wireshark decode, this is a great way to view that data because Wireshark presents it to you in a plain English, well laid out way that you can really help understand what's going on. Plus, Wireshark has additional analytics that it can provide, additional reporting, additional graphs of information, additional expert analysis. It's in Wireshark, so you can take the data once you've captured it and then put it right into a third-party application like a Sniffer or a Wireshark. This can obviously be a lot of data. If you're anyone who's captured data before for an application, you could have megabytes or gigabytes or more of data that you have captured. So make sure that you absolutely have the disk space or the memory set aside to be able to capture that data. And once you've done that, now you can really see everything. This is a sample capture that I did. Notice at the command line, not exactly the easiest thing to follow. It takes a little bit of time to understand what you're looking at. Different settings that you can have to change the names or the IP addresses associated with these, but you can see data that's going back and forth. And you can also change the verbosity of this so that you're seeing a lot more in every packet if you wanted to, but this is where you would see the IP handshakes, the TCP handshake going back and forth. This is where you would do it using TCP dump. So if you're somebody who answered C, TCP dump, yeah, you got that one absolutely right. Well done with that. It wouldn't be ARP. ARP is a way that you could see what MAC addresses have been associated with IP addresses that you've accessed. That doesn't tell you anything about a TCP handshake. It would not be Netcat, which is pretty useful for sending information over the network. A network concatenation, you could take a file and send it across the network or receive a file across the network using Netcat. Has nothing to do with TCP handshake. Netstat shows you the connections that are being made to or from a local device. So you can see who's talking. You don't see the handshake, the TCP handshake going back and forth, but you absolutely can see the data that eventually makes it from one side to the other. You can see that I have created a connection to Socrative and that TCP connection is sending data, but it doesn't show me the handshake. And finally, traceroute, which could show me the route that my packet takes to get from me to the Socrative server and back again, but it doesn't show me any handshake information. The only option available on the screen that does show the TCP handshake between a web server and a client workstation would be C, TCP dump. 44% of you got that one absolutely right. This is information that all comes from the exam objectives. The SY0501 exam objectives are comprehensive. Pages and pages and pages of data. You'll notice that all of my videos, I use this as my checklist. So I give you exactly what CompTIA has asked for in their exam, and in their exams, they stay extremely close to this data that's on the exam objectives. I would not be sending you off on a crazy departure here if I told you that if you knew everything in the exam objectives, you're going to do fine on the exam, because they don't go outside the scope of this. They're very tight on that one. They stay very close to what is on these exam objectives, and rightly so, because the objectives, they're telling you, here's what we expect you to know. And if you know everything that's on there, you're going to do fine on your exam. It's a great resource. It's a great checklist. It's the first thing you should download. You should go to CompTIA's website or go to the Google machine, type in CompTIA exam objectives, or go to my website, professormesser.com/objectives, and I redirect you over to the CompTIA website. So that's one way you can get your hands on these. Make sure you get a good book. You watch the videos, you do some Q&A, you get some hands-on, and then to know, do I know everything I need to know? This is a good checklist when you're done. So make sure you have these exam objectives available. They are extremely valuable. Make sure you get your hands on those and you're able to use those for your exam. Well, we've gone through an hour of Q&A. Can you believe it? But don't worry, I have another one of these all ready to go. Of course, all of the replays are available on my website. The replay of this study group is available immediately afterwards. I hit end. It takes a minute or two to finally finish up what it's doing on the YouTube side, and this video is immediately available. So there's that for you. The podcasts usually are out the same day or the next day. And of course, we have new study groups. The next study group is in October. October 17th is our next Security Plus study group. I do a study group for A Plus and Network Plus as well. If you want to know when the next live event is going to be, maybe when you're watching this, it's well after October the 17th of 2018. You can always go to professormesser.com/calendar. I keep a list of all of the upcoming live events right there. You'll know exactly when we go live. I give you options on where you can go to register for the event so I can send you an email to remind you when we're going live. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel, which it tells you immediately when we're going live. That's an easy way to do it by going to professormesser.com/YouTube, clicking the subscribe, and then clicking the bell so you can be notified when we go live. Stick around for the next hour. I'm just going to open up the phone lines. I'll talk to you. We'll see what's going on. You can ask me questions. I'll take questions from the chat room. I open up the phone lines. I'll give you information on that in a moment. You can see those. Don't forget about my course notes, though. You can find those at professormesser.com/securitycn. Just told you about YouTube. We don't have to do that again. professormesser.com/Twitter, professormesser.com/Facebook, professormesser.com/Instagram. Just go to professormesser.com/ the name of the thing you would hope to find me at. And if I'm not there, tell me I'm not there, and I'll go do that one. So that's easy. There's a contact us link at the top or the bottom of the website. If you'd like to get an hour of CEUs just for watching this, I'll give you a full 1 hour of webinar-based CEUs by going to the top or the bottom of my website, clicking the contact us link, put in your name, your email address, and then in that message, which you're sending to me, I read through all of these. You can put any message you would like, but somewhere in that message, put the words, what should I do? Now I have to think of one because we're at the end of the study. Let's do objectives. That would be a good one because you need those objectives. So make sure you get those exam objectives. Go to professormesser.com, contact us link at the top or the bottom, put in your name, your email address. Those are important since I have to send you back an email. And then somewhere in that message to me, or maybe the only thing you put in that message to me, that's fine too. We don't have to be friends. It doesn't have to be that way. Put somewhere in there the word objectives. And I'll know that you must have watched this because I can then give you an hour. I'll send you an email that says, I hereby certify that you must have sat through this entire thing and watched everything. Aren't you awesome? And I do think you're awesome. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sitting through this hour. Thanks for doing the Q&A with me. Thanks for your ongoing support of the site. We could not do this without you, and we're so happy that you're able to join us. Stick around for the next hour. I'll open up the phone lines. You can ask other things, but if you have to leave now, I can appreciate that as well. But I thank you for being here. We will see you next time on the Professor Messer Security Plus Study Group. Well, that was an hour that went pretty quick. All that stuff we did. Let's get these phone lines up and running. See, I'm not even prepared. You skip a week and you don't do that. So in the chat room, if people want to put questions in the chat room, you're more than welcome to do that. I watch the chat room as it's going by. I can see all of this happening as it's going by. You're the blue ones. The yellow ones are the general chat room, which I don't pay any attention to. I pay a little bit of attention to. So we'll get that running. Let me first get, how's this done again? I have to remember everything like I'm a child, like I've never done this before in my life. How does this work? Is this a computer? It's asking for a password. Let's start this up and see if I can make this happen. It's like I've been gone a year. Okay, that works. Let's call into the show, and I have to turn things down over here. My board is way over on the other side because I haven't moved anything. That's a little better. Let's call into the show, and then I'll tell you how to call into the show. We do that by finding on my screen my Skypey, and I click a button on Skypey, and I call a thing, and it goes... Thank
you for calling.
Well, you're welcome. I'm going to turn that off. And then I have to type a thing in right there. And then I have to push a pound sign. And it says,
enter your 6-digit PIN number.
Well, I'll do that. We'll put in this one. And then I type that. And it says,
welcome.
See, welcome. And that means that you would be able to call in anywhere in the continental United States. You can call in at a toll-free number. I pay for the call, 855-785-RJ45. And if you're calling from outside the continental United States, I've still got a free way to do this. You can go to use Skype for this. Put a +1 at the beginning because Skype allows you to call toll-free numbers with no Skype minutes required. So you can put in a +1, 855-785-7545, and you could call in if you wanted to. You don't have to. We'll of course go through this the website as well. We can go through all of those things and figure out the details. Let me make sure that we've got the details here on my screen. I think we're good to go. I think we could take calls if we really, really wanted to. Some folks in the chat room are asking questions about PKIs and CAs, which I will tell you they're not as bad as it seems when you start getting into encryption technologies. A lot of people get wrapped around the axle when it comes to certificate authorities or public key infrastructures. We won't go into a lot of detail. I think I will have some questions next month on either CAs or public key infrastructures. The certificate authorities, though, people think the certificate authorities are bigger, I think, than what they really are. A certificate authority is just someone who signs the paper. You know, maybe you ever see the old, this will date me a bit, or maybe not. Some of you still watch the reruns of MASH. And Radar would always put the pieces of paper in front of the colonel, and the colonel would just sign. He's talking to somebody else, but Radar's putting the papers there, and the colonel's just signing them. The colonel's the certificate authority. Colonel's not doing anything else. In fact, the colonel he's not even wanting to do anything else. He's not performing any function with that piece of paper. He's not encrypting the piece of paper. He's not secretly putting the piece of paper somewhere else. He's just signing it. Perhaps the worst CA ever, because most CAs are at least going to check that the person presenting this certificate to them is the right person. That's why these certificate authorities work the way they do. And they're saying that if I present my certificate saying, my name is James Messer, I am at james@professormesser.com, I have this website, professormesser.com, and my company is Messer Studios, LLC, I need you to sign this certificate that I created, please. And they sign the certificate. They first check it out. They look at my DNS record. Maybe depending on the certificate I bought, they call me. Hey, James, we got a request from you. Is this from you? Yeah? Okay. And we have a conversation. Tell me about your company. What do you do? What's your URL? I'm seeing this information on your DNS record. Tell me what this is. They verify that detail, and then they sign it and send it back to me. So that's one where Radar is presenting the signing request and having the signature made by the certificate authority. Now, the point of this is that if a third party comes to my website, if you come to my website, anybody who comes to my website today, you'll notice you're on an encrypted version of my website. By default, my website makes everything HTTPS. So the instant you hit my website, I send you that piece of paper that was signed by the certificate authority. I send you the certificate. And I say, if you want to be sure it's me, let me just send this off to you. Your browser looks at it and says, oh, I just got the certificate. Henry Blake signed this certificate, or VeriSign, or any of the other certificate authorities, because there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of certificate authorities. Henry Blake signed this certificate. Do I have Henry Blake in my list? Let me go through my list. The browser looks it through the list and goes, yeah, Henry Blake, that's a legitimate certificate authority. And I've checked the digital signature. That really did come from Henry Blake. You're good to go. And the browser allows that function to go. That's all the certificate authority does. The actual encryption part, where there's encryption and the different methods of encryption and the asymmetric and sending the symmetric, that's all has nothing to do with the certificate authority. The certificate authority is just a gatekeeper. It's just a way to make sure that you're talking to the right places. And that's why we usually will create our own certificate authorities internally, because we don't want to have to pay a third party for our own internal servers. So we'll create our own certificate authority, and the director of the security part of your company will set it up so that they can sign their internal web servers, and they know anybody in the organization connecting to that web server is over a connection that has been set up by the internal IT department, which in many ways is just as important as having a certificate that's been signed by an external for your external users. So it becomes pretty useful to have that there. Make sure that you're familiar with those details as well. I think whenever I start going through the details of certificate authorities and making that happen, and I agree, they do a fair amount prior to just signing the paper. Ideally, this is where everything breaks down. What if a certificate authority doesn't do a good job at signing that paper, checking the details of what's on the paper? What if the certificate authority accidentally lets its private key out and anybody could sign anybody else's certificate? Well, everything falls apart at that point. And the problem is that's happened before. This has happened to certificate authorities that had to shut down. The certificate authorities went away. The browser companies had to remove that certificate authority from their list. Enormous problems when that occurs. It's an obvious, enormous issue. There are certificate authorities that the browsers have decided, Google specifically decided, we're not happy with the way Symantec is doing certificates. We don't think their method of doing certificates is good enough. We're not going to show those as being trusted anymore. So sometimes the browser manufacturers, the browser developers have decided when a certificate authority isn't good enough. And now you're getting into a pretty interesting gray area of who gets to decide if a certificate authority is good enough or not. And the answer is all of us do. We all get to decide that. And I can't say most of us in the industry, yeah, we're pretty happy with Google saying that. I had a Symantec or a company owned by Symantec. I used to have that as the certificate on my site. And I decided after doing some research during that year of me having that, I'm not going to go with them again. Not completely happy with how that's being done, and I ended up going a different direction. Today, the certificate that you're seeing on my site is one that is created by the front end to my site, which is Cloudflare. Cloudflare is a reverse proxy. So you're effectively hitting Cloudflare, and the Cloudflare you're hitting is from different parts of the world. They are caching information on that Cloudflare server and sending you cached information, or behind the scenes, they're asking for an updated version of my website that they will then send to you, which they will also cache. So there is a lot of good information and speed that is, we don't have to request. Don't have to request a brand new copy of my page every time somebody hits that Cloudflare server, because nothing changes on the page unless I change it. And at that point, it notifies the Cloudflare archive so that that cache can be updated or removed and updated. Of course, it times out after a while as well. So there's a lot that happens there. So my certificate is on that Cloudflare service. In fact, the many different Cloudflare front ends that are all over the world. So no matter where you happen to be in the world, you get the fastest possible version of my site. So that was done intentionally. Now, between the Cloudflare server, the reverse proxy, and my site, there's actually load balancer in the middle and then my servers. I encrypt every step of the way. Everything from end to end across all of my servers is encrypted and protected, so nobody could ever see this data that you're sending back and forth, and that's by design. There are some people that they will have Cloudflare be the front end to provide the encrypted communication, and then they'll do in the clear on the back end. I absolutely do not do that. everything that you send to my server end to end is completely encrypted. And that's because it needs to be that way. As someone who was a systems engineer for a next generation firewall company for many years, I've seen some stuff, to put it mildly. And I want all of your information to be very protected. I'm very particular about that. So I spend a lot of time making sure that my certificates are up to date, that they are signed by a certificate authority that we all can trust, and that they have the highest level of encryption that is appropriate for the type of data that we're sending back and forth. So that's another reason I don't keep your data on my site. Some of you that are nice enough to purchase products from my site, you're not purchasing it from me. You're purchasing it from a third party that has a much higher level of security because they're dealing with credit card numbers. I don't want you to put credit card numbers on my site. I want you to have the credit card conversation going on with the third party that actually processes. I don't even see your credit card numbers. I couldn't get your credit card number if I wanted to, because you don't send it to my site at all. So all of these things all happen behind the scenes. But that's why you'll notice that there's a very specific way we do things. And if any of you ever have a question about, is it this secure? Is that secure? How do you do this? Where do you store this information? Just ask me. There's a contact us link at the top or the bottom of my website. I design all of this on my site. There's no third party I deal with. I don't have a separate team of people taking care of my site. It's me in the room, and Lori is my marketing manager, and I handle everything associated with the management of the websites, the back-end processes, the third parties we communicate with, the communication process itself. I handle everything because I know that if I do it, I know exactly how secure it's going to be and that it's going to be working the way we would expect. So it becomes pretty useful to have that there. There is quite a bit that you need to know for the exam. Some of us, I'm going to scroll up a bit and look at the details of questions that were coming in for those pieces. But I kind of went on with the certificate authority for quite some time. PKI is another one that you'll run into. PKI is sort of a generic term, though, this public key infrastructure. Now imagine if you in your organization had, you didn't have any certificate authority set up. Maybe you were just building some web servers for the first time and you realize internally these web servers need some encryption certificates. We need to set up a centralized way to deploy and manage these certificates. We need a public key infrastructure, and that's what a PKI is. You also see PKI, the term used when dealing with anything dealing with public-private key infrastructures, especially if you're setting up those for email. A lot of people use public and private keys for email communication. We certainly use it for encrypting data on our drives. So if you have a mobile device that is leaving or going outside the company, they'll very often encrypt those hard drives. There's encryption capabilities built into the Windows operating system and Linux and Mac OS. Those all use asymmetric algorithms to be able to encrypt that data. So all of those things, the really combination of symmetric and asymmetric. So all of those things, you have to have some way to manage those keys. What if somebody had a laptop and for some reason the key was lost? We no longer had access to the key. Maybe there's a hardware failure. We pulled out the drive. Now this drive doesn't have the key that was contained on that particular piece of hardware. Now we need to go get that key. We need to have some way to manage and back up these keys and have other access to them, because all of this data is part of the data you have on your business, and you don't want to lose any of that. So that's why we talk about public key infrastructure as being important and not being something that you can design and set up in a day. So make sure that if you're someone who is in that process of trying to put together a PKI, you need to bring in a lot of different people, a lot of different experts to figure out what's the best way for doing this. And once you finally piece together your business requirements, building the PKI is relatively straightforward. Here's what we want to encrypt. Here's the different types of certificates we have. We have some on web servers. We have some on database servers. We also have some certificates that we use for VPN access. We have certificates we put on different pieces of hardware to identify that hardware is from our company. We have certificates we use for encryption of the data on the storage devices that are part of that hardware. So you can really take this to the nth degree. So make sure that you do that. Make sure you go through the process of understanding all of those things. And having all those pieces there. So in the chat room, people are saying, so www.professormesser.com points to the proxy, and the proxy points to my server addresses. Effectively, yes. What really happens is www.professormesser.com points to the proxy. The proxy actually points to a load balancer, and the load balancer balances the load between multiple web servers. And at any particular time, I might have more or fewer web servers depending on what's going on. And at any time, I can pull a web server out of commission. I can put it back into, but I also do that for redundancy's sake, so that that if I lose one of those web servers for some reason, the other web server can pick up the slack and nobody even knows the difference. That's the idea. Now, I did have a problem this past week. Early morning, some folks said I wasn't able to get to your site because I have one load balancer. And that one load balancer was upgraded. Its operating system was upgraded. And when they rebooted it, it did not come back. So they had to, oddly enough, we fixed it. Here's how we fixed it. Very technical. So if you ever have a load balancer going south on you, what we did is we turned it off and we turned it back on again. Not kidding you. And it came back up. Everything worked great. So there you go. That's the real life how to fix a load balancer in my network. And that load balancer came up and suddenly everybody was able to do that. So yes, my domain name does have a DNS entry pointing to, no, my domain name does not have a DNS entry pointing to the load balancer. My DNS entry has my domain name has a DNS entry pointing to my reverse proxy. And then you don't know where the reverse proxy is sending the data. The reverse proxy behind the scenes knows to talk to my load balancer. And then the load balancer is set up with connections to the appropriate web servers and how they're operating. And then, of course, there are connections behind those web servers that talk to database servers. So there's multiple steps. You would think none of this would work at all. It works beautifully. In fact, most of the sites you go to have one or more of those technologies in place to be able to make all of this work. It is remarkable it works at all, but it does work. It works quite nicely, actually. So, and this way, I know wherever you are in the world, you're getting an encrypted connection. You're getting the fastest possible connection you can have, depending on where you are in the world. And I know that all of the traffic coming to my servers is coming from a very particular place, because those reverse proxies also have quite a bit of security functionality built into them. They can look for known vulnerabilities. They can stop denial of service attacks, or at least mitigate them in many ways. They can look for particular database injections. They can look for all kinds of different security issues and stop them there at the reverse proxy before they even hit my load balancer. So there's a lot of really good security that's out there on the edge that I'm taking advantage of. But of course, that's not the only place. Security, a layered approach from security in depth should be what you use. There's also security at the load balancer. There's also security technologies on my web servers. There's also security technologies on the content management software that I use. So there's separate places to go to be able to find the bad guys and stop them in their tracks, ideally, before these are happening. So make sure you think about that. So what's the purpose of using the reverse proxy? Really two big reasons, three really. One is for speed, because they can cache data, and wherever you are in the world, you're getting a local reverse proxy that is caching information. So there's speed with that. There is a good bit of security on that, as I just mentioned. It can stop and mitigate denial of service attacks along with other types of attacks. And it's got some nice capabilities to allow me to manage and control where the traffic is going. So if I wanted to bring up another load balancer and another set of servers in another data center, I can do that and point different proxies to different load balancers, or the same proxy to different load balancers, and have it load balance between the load balancers. Wow. There's a lot I can do with this. So the capabilities I have for setting up that first hop really gives me a lot of flexibility, and ideally provides you with faster access and more uptime, which is what I'm really focusing on. I don't want my site to ever go down. When it does, that had to be a big one. So now I get to think, well, maybe I should put up multiple load balancers because I only have one. I can build a new one in an instant. The problem I had with this one, I wanted to get fixed though. So it was early in the morning. It's like 4 a.m. my time. So I apologize if some of you ran into that. It wasn't down very long. It's one of those where the best time of the day you could have done it, where nobody's really hitting the site very much. And one nice thing also about that reverse proxy, while my site was down, a lot of the pages on my site were still up and running because it had a copy of them. It takes a copy and keeps it local. So if my site does temporarily go down, it's feeding you the latest version of my site with a little bar at the top that says, we weren't able to talk to Professor Messer, but at least we're giving you what was there last time we hit. And that helped for a while. That was up for a couple of hours. And then it stops working. So you run into that too. You never want to have that happen. And then it goes away to go through all those pieces. So it's a very nice set of capabilities that's there. If you're someone who is running a website where, we get a lot of hits to the website. It's a very popular site. So I want to be sure it's available, that it's fast, that it's running the way people expect, and that it's secure. Because that's the way I'd want a site to be able to work for me too. Have all of those pieces there. From a Security Plus perspective, we just hit 4 different security technologies and having that available. So first, a reverse proxy, which is great to have there. That's the inbound proxy to my web servers, where I've got security on that, a number of different security functions. I've got the details on this, and finding the details of, well, there's different things, but finding the details of that reverse proxy, I can put security on the reverse proxy. I've certainly got security on the load balancer, because the load balancer is only receiving traffic from Cloudflare, my reverse proxy. Traffic can't come from anywhere else but my reverse proxy, which greatly limits anybody coming inbound on that piece. The other one is that once I get past the load balancer, I've of course got a firewall on all of my web servers. So there's firewall, the personal firewall technology, Firewall D in my particular case for the Linux version that I'm using, so that I can allow or disallow types of traffic coming inbound. Once you get onto my server, I'm looking for all kinds of different denial of service attacks, brute force attacks, looking for anybody that's getting through the firewall to be able to do other things. And then past that, once I get into the content management system, I have another firewall that's designed specifically for my content management system, looking for things that are specific to people hitting my website. So look at all the different places that you can, and there's a couple more security technologies I'm not mentioning, but those are the big ones when you go from end to end with those. So make sure that if you're someone also who is planning to bring up a web server, it's not going to be any one thing. It's not going to be a single firewall. It's not going to be a single IPS. It's not going to be a single denial of service or brute force prevention. It'll be a number of different pieces to have that there. So see what you can find that works for you. And if you aren't quite sure, do what I did and talk to people that have set up systems like this before. I was extremely familiar with the edge firewall technologies, IPS, cloud-based malware detection, next generation firewall, application filtering. But then you get into load balancing web servers with PHP. That's a completely different world. So you may have to grab experts from different areas and bring them all in a room and say, how do we make this conglomeration of things the most secure and the most accessible? And they will tell you. So that's what I did. That was the best thing I ever did, because now I became familiar with all of those across the board. And now I understand exactly how to set up the servers, what I want them to do, how I want them to communicate, and provide that security. So it becomes useful to have that for all of those pieces. So that works for me too. Whenever you start trying to piece all of those together and have them there, that becomes important. And I think I could probably write an article on it now on how to do this. I use WordPress for my content management system, how to make WordPress do this, because there's a lot of moving parts here We've got the website. You got the membership side of things. If you purchase a product, you can log into your membership side. There has to be integration there. You have to be able to gain access to other services you're running on the same server. So you have to make sure all of those are using the same security methodologies. So make sure you think about that when you're working through it as well. I think that becomes useful. Yeah, Cloudflare does work. In the chat room, Tom's mentioning DDoS mitigation, the distributed denial of service. Cloudflare does have a very good way to do that. I fortunately at this point have not been in a place where I've had extensive denial of service attacks. There have been a number of distributed denial of service attacks to my site. And depending on the way the DDoS happens, you're going to use different mitigation techniques. The mitigation technique I used did not include Cloudflare. Actually, it did to some degree. So you never know what you're going to do. What you need to have is have everything in place and ready to go. And when it happens, now you can start turning things on and turning things off. But if you didn't have it set up that way to begin with, you'd be scrambling. You don't want that either. Let's see if the phone lines work, shall we? I've been talking long enough, haven't I? Let's go to South Florida. The 954 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller.
Hello.
Hello. Hi. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Oh, how you doing, Professor Messer? This is Kevin from Pembroke Pines.
Welcome, Kevin. My old stomping ground in Pembroke Pines and Miramar. What can we do for you, sir?
Yes. I first have a technical question, and the first technical question is about VTP, the VLAN Trunk Protocol.
Yep.
I just want to know that, like, hypothetically speaking, that if one of your switches, if you had to upgrade because one of your switches went defective, and you took it down, and then you bought a new switch, but you didn't configure the VLANs, even though the revision number is real low, would that cause a VTP wipeout?
It depends on where the VTP configuration starts from. So one of the backing up quite a bit for the people that are listening in and having these functionalities here, the VLAN trunking protocol becomes pretty useful on very large implementations of networks. It can become useful in large implementations of networks. For those, we talked earlier in the study group about VLANs and being able to segment the network out into VLANs. On some networks, you might have 2 VLANs. You might have 5. You could have 10. Some networks, there are hundreds of VLANs in their infrastructure. There's enormous campuses. You've got organizations that are spread across the world. And so you're having to manage a lot of different switches, and each one of those switches has a different configuration for VLANs, and because you have to define each interface on that switch as belonging to a different VLAN. And that definition can be one that is done manually, where you log into the switch, you set the configurations, and you apply those to the switch, and they're set. Or it's something that can be done automatically. The VLAN trunking protocol is one of those protocols that's able to do that, where you configure everything on a central console, and then you hit a button and it deploys those configurations out to all of the different switches in your environment. If you're in an enterprise environment, that's what you want. You might have hundreds of switches. There's no way you want to log in to every single switch and configure these individual switches manually. And so having that centralized single pane of glass, they call it, the centralized management console, allows you to make those configurations. So in the scenario you posed, switch goes down, switch breaks. We throw it out, we put a new switch in place. Ideally, you would go into your management software and say, we've just replaced this switch, here's the new one, deploy that configuration out to that switch, and it does that. Now, in fact, that's exactly how most management systems will work when you're deploying those things that way. But if you haven't made a backup of the configuration on that switch, you've not defined the configuration details for that location and that switch, and then you lose the switch, then you're in trouble. Most management systems are automatically making backups for you. Most management systems give you the option for switching out equipment because that happens all the time. And it makes it very easy for you just send a switch out, just say, put it in the rack, turn it on, I'll take it from here. and the switch automatically grabs an IP address. You swap that IP address out in your management system. It deploys the configuration, and minutes later, you're up and running. When it's configured and engineered properly, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, I know it saves a lot of time. I was just making sure because I know about the VTP wipeout, and I just want to make sure, like if that's only for like if the revision number is higher than its counterparts, then that's when it will do that.
The challenge you have with any management system that's doing anything automatically is there's the potential for systems to configure a device in a way that you weren't expecting. And that's the downside with any automated system like VTP or anything dynamic which operates in that way, which is why it's almost a philosophical conversation that you have with network administrators sometimes, where you talk about an automated way to deploy these and they go, no, we're good. We've already been bitten by these version numbers and having it overwrite configurations. We do everything manually and we're guaranteed not to have downtime. And in some people's environments, even if you have hundreds of switches, that might actually be the best solution depending on how important that network is. On other people's networks, they just don't have that kind of time or resources. They don't have a choice. They just have to make sure they're managing these version numbers and making sure that when they deploy an update, that they're not overriding something unintentionally that would cause problems later on down the road.
Yeah.
It's a significant problem. You're absolutely right.
And I also meant to ask you a couple of months ago about a CompTIA question about the stackable certificates.
Mm-hmm.
I was wanting to know, like, how come they don't send out the stackable certificates to the actual recipient? Like, for example, I passed the A+ and the Network Plus, and they gave me the title of IT operations specialist or whatever. And I know they didn't send out the physical, they gave me a PDF, but they didn't send out the physical certificate of that or that ID card.
This is one that is relatively new in the CompTIA world, something introduced this year, which is CompTIA's Stackable certifications. For those not familiar with it, you may not even realize you have one because there's really no way to even know that that's there. Let me move some of this off the screen.
Yeah, I found out from you a couple of months ago, and I was wondering how come I didn't receive it when you brought it to one of the callers, and I was like, how come I didn't receive it? I passed the Network Plus and the A+, so and I saw it in my dashboard on the CompTIA website.
It's true. And in fact, you are correct. If you pass your A+ and your Network Plus, we're looking at it on the screen, you indeed have earned your CompTIA IT Operations Specialist. Now, this is something new for CompTIA. I think what they're trying to do is give you a little bonus for having gone through all of this. A lot of people talk about, I earned the CompTIA triplicate or the CompTIA triumvirate. I have the A+, the Network Plus, and the Security Plus. And so what they're trying to do is give you a way to call it something that's a little more substantial. So if you have your A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, you are technically the CompTIA Secure Infrastructure Specialist. It's more currently, it's more of something that you can put on a resume, and it's a talking point. Not a lot of people know that CompTIA have rolled these out just because that's the nature of the way these things work. It takes time for these things to go out over time and have people made aware of it. And perhaps more importantly, the hiring managers are not aware of this. So if you were to put on your resume, I'm a CompTIA Secure Infrastructure Specialist, they go, oh, I'm sorry, we're really looking for someone who's Security Plus certified. Well, that's what that means. That means I've got A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus. Well, that's not what you said. You said you were a Secure Infrastructure Specialist. So you do run into those scenarios where you almost have to put the name of the combined certificate, the stackable name, and then you also have to spell out all the individual names anyway, at least at the moment. Now, will it always be that way? I don't know. It depends on how popular these particular combinations are. I think it's really something more for us as the certificate holders to show that we have combined these things together and they really do mean something to the rest of the world. And maybe in the future, hiring managers will become more familiar with it. It's one of those where we're just going to have to wait and see exactly how that turns out.
Yeah, I already put it on my LinkedIn profile,
Good.
on my resume, on my LinkedIn account. I put all three of them just in case
Yep.
I put in brackets of the A plus and network plus just in case if anyone's not familiarized with that.
Yep. Good for you, because that's what you're going to have to do right now. It won't matter on a resume if you are a CompTIA cloud admin professional, because nobody's hiring knows what that means. So those, oh, I'm sorry, we were looking for someone with Network Plus. Well, that's what that means. I have Network Plus and I have Cloud Plus. You kind of have to spell it out, and I think you're doing the right thing by doing that.
Yeah, and my last question is about the job market, where I don't know if this is I know it's a little bit talked about, but as now I'm moving more to IT and I'm applying for jobs and stuff like that, I know there's a little in the IT field, there's a little age discrimination going on because like I applied for the Geek Squad at Best Buy, and when I was applying for that job, they mentioned that it's only 18 to 40 years old. And I'm about to turn 38
Wow.
tomorrow.
That's remarkable that they would even say such a thing, considering that is not legal. The age is a protected class, if you will. You cannot choose to hire or not hire somebody by age unless part of the job is one that is limited in some way to that particular feature. So if you were 41 and they could say, well, we don't think any 41-year-old could possibly do this job. It's not possible for a 41-year-old to do this job. That would be different. But we all know the computer doesn't care what your age at all. And ageism, and I've mentioned this on other study groups, ageism in any particular role, on any job, in anywhere, is a problem. It's a significant problem that has not really been addressed to really affect this. As you have probably seen firsthand, they've already told you, yeah, we absolutely discriminate based on age. And they just say it straight up. Yeah, we completely don't do this. And that's for someone like Best Buy to do it is remarkable, because those organizations, being a public company, having particular rules and regulations with Federal Trade Commission, their managers are drilled every year on hiring practices, non-discrimination. If their HR department heard our conversation right now, they would not be happy with that particular hiring manager at that particular location. And I'm saying that in a very mild form. They would be furious. They would be on the phone. They'd probably be calling you any second, trying to figure out who that was. But that is a significant problem, to the point that, and I'm not sure exactly where I saw this over the last couple of weeks, it probably was a mention on Reddit, where people have started removing things from their resume that might give away how old they are. So anytime they have a degree, they don't mention what years they went to college. Anytime they mention a previous job, they only put the last 2 jobs they had, so that you can't see that someone like me, I'm 50 years old. I can't, and what I'm qualified to do and what I've done for the vast majority of my career is to be a systems engineer, to get on a plane, to go from place to place, to show my wares, to put in installations of equipment, to do evaluations, to make the products do what we say they're going to do. If I had to go out and interview for one of those jobs today, I'd probably run into very much the same problem, whether it's overt or something that people just don't like hiring older people because they just don't. It may be something that's just behind the scenes in the back of their heads. They don't like that. It's not comfortable to them, and they don't want to do it. I think, and I've mentioned this before in other study groups, make your network of people, gather the network of people you know today, and make sure that you keep in touch with this network of people that you know, so that as you go through your career, and this is a career that's going to last you for your entire lifetime. IT, you can do anything and for as long as you want. Make sure that group of people, because they're going to be getting older with you, make sure you keep in touch with them, because people my age would be able to know me and hire me much more comfortably than if I went into a room with a 30-year-old person I don't know, and I can tell them, yeah, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to hop on a plane and go do this type of thing. They're like, how could he get on a plane? He's 50. That's old. There's no way he can keep up with what we need to do. He's not a good fit. Whether that's legal or not, completely different question. Whether it's real or not is not a question at all. It's an absolutely real thing. And you have to be very, very aware of it and plan for it and have options available when you get to be an old guy like me.
Yeah, I mean, everything was okay. Just that I know that when I was signing the online application, they mentioned about age, and they show a bracket of 18. You have basically a bracket of 18 to 40, and I was like, why would they have that? Like, I was kind of a little bit kind of taken aback by that. Like, why would they 18 to 40, whatever? And I know, like, something like age discrimination, that'd be very hard to prove.
Hold on a second. On the online form, it says 18 to 40?
Yeah.
This wasn't a guy just in a room saying, we really like to hire people that are 40 or less. This was on a page that you were filling out for a job descriptor, a job interview application?
Yes.
Well, there's some work we need to do now. An investigation. I need to fill out a form and try to work at my local Best Buy, I think. I may be doing that after we're done with this study group. That's remarkable. I am going to give Best Buy the benefit of a doubt and say certainly it's referring to something else on their website. Maybe there were it's remarkable they would even categorize things that way. Other people on the chat room are going, well, maybe it's a drop-down box. You have different options. And if you're 40 to 50, I don't know why you'd even put that on an interview form. That sounds remarkably dangerous. Well,
it's an 18 to 40, and tomorrow I'll be turning 38. So you
snuck in you're going to get the job over me, Kevin. That's just how it is.
Yeah, so I'll just kind of wonder about that. And not only that, just from an observational standpoint, when I go to Best Buys, I know that the personnel, the Geek Squad, are all young people, and I have to wonder myself. I'm pretty sure some old people will apply for these jobs. I mean, people in their 30s or 40s.
This is remarkable. So one of those things that I think would be interesting to find out more about this anywhere. One of the things you do find, though, and this is sort of common to the industry in general, is that we do generally have people who are younger starting in those help desk type jobs, but that's normal because the jobs that need more experience are people that tend to be in the business for longer. So there's a natural pathway when you're trying to get that first job. You're right out of college. You're generally going to be younger. It makes sense that there would be younger people in those particular positions. And as you get into the higher level positions, you get into systems engineering, senior systems engineering, managers of the systems engineers, you start to see old people like me in those particular roles. So that's I think kind of a common thing. I wouldn't chalk that up to discrimination, but it's certainly something that everybody needs to be aware of and everybody needs to plan for with your own local network of people. LinkedIn is a fabulous tool to use for these types of things. And as I mentioned, some people are making their resumes, older people like me, making their resumes much more generic so you can at least get your foot in the door.
Okay. So thank you for your time.
Thanks, Kevin. Best of luck.
All right. Thank you.
And that's one where I'm going to be figuring that one out later on today. I'm going to sign up. I'm going to put in my job application for the Best Buy Geek Squad locally. We'll see what we can do with that one. Back to the phones. This caller's been holding a while. Caller 661 area code. Thanks for calling. What's your name? Where are you calling from? He's given up. He's had it. He's been on hold for 16 minutes listening to me drone on about age discrimination. He's on mute. I've got him potted up. We're listening to the line. He's there. Oh, there he is. Hello. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Oh, sorry about that, Professor. My name's Luis.
Thanks, Luis. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
Oh, hello, Professor. I was just calling I called last time about how I got my job.
Yes.
Okay, so well, me, the way that I got my job is I kind of made my own job. The job that I was looking for wasn't really out there, so I kind of had to sell myself in a way. You have to sell yourself to people.
So when you say you made your own job, how does that? What exactly is that? What type of job did you create?
Okay, so I guess I've been a steganographer my whole life. I just didn't know that was what I was called. I know various languages. I've been making ciphers from a young age.
Nice.
And I just never made the connection. I didn't like school. I just
Me either.
I wasn't very focused. I wasn't very focused.
I was not a very good student. I agree. Yeah, you and me were probably hanging out together.
Yeah, because we human beings, we're not born with prejudices. Always are made for us by someone else who wants something.
So true.
And somebody's always going to get something out of it, and it's not going to be you. And I just felt like since everybody was reading out of the same book, I was like, okay, let me think outside the box. I started collecting viruses from a young age because I used to, use Kazaa and all that stuff, and I would get viruses all the time.
Sure. Well, definitely. If you were using Kazaa, you had plenty of viruses.
Exactly.
Yes.
So I started collecting viruses from a young age, and I started breaking them down. Like, oh, so that's what that does.
Good for you.
And I started.
How were you breaking them down? Were you putting them into a deassembler and looking at what they were doing?
No, I was just isolating them from what was not from a clean install. I'm like, okay, so I would purposefully get viruses on a clean install and be like, okay, that changed.
Gotcha.
And then I would isolate that.
Okay.
And then I wasn't very aware of this stuff, but I was just let's fast forward to the future. I don't want to give away too much of the stuff because I don't want to make new ciphers and stuff. But the way that I found my job was I found an IP address in the image. I went to the server. I did an nmap. There was only one port that was open. It was port 17, quote of the day.
Right.
And and it was Bob Dylan. You got to serve somebody. And then I was like, okay, I guess that's a sign. I got to go work for somebody.
Right.
And then
because obviously
and then,
that's how it would appear through quote of the day and Bob Dylan.
Yeah, so I went to my job interview, and then I told them that at home I was experimenting with retro reflection.
Okay, good.
With
yep.
resonant frequencies that I happen to have my hands on a nonlinear junction detector. It's a device that illuminates a small region of space with high frequency.
Sure, I've got one of those back here, I'm sure somewhere.
Yeah, but this was all because there's some bugs that have that are passive. They don't have a battery. They just need electromagnetic energy
Well, that's
from
true.
an outside
That's
source
right.
to become energized.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the way that AM/FM works with amplitude modulation and parasitic frequency modulation.
That's correct. Yep.
And
so, that is some pretty high tech surveillance stuff, though.
So I mean, yeah, I've always had I never knew that I was a steganographer. I was always trying to hide information in plain sight because I knew that from the beginning that there was always a problem with cryptographic hashes or the message digest because we were always having to come up with new ones. I knew that they were susceptible to brute force attacks or rainbow table attacks, even just to the known base values of the elliptic curve of the digital signature standard.
So what is it that when you went to that interview then, you got the sign from above, it's time to go get this job, and you walk into the room, you've obviously got I tell people all the time, have a home lab. You've got a home lab plus 10. You've got everything you would want from stories to tell about the things that you've done. When you walk in the room with the hiring manager, how did you get that story across to them? What were the things you told them?
Well, I told them that I was doing this for free, and it was very unfair to me, and I was hitting dead ends all the time, and I felt that I told them like I've been working for a while, so I have some money. I didn't need a lot of money, so they could just whatever was fair to them. And I told them that what I wanted to do was that I obviously couldn't help them with any of their projects that they're doing, but what I could do is I wanted to go back to the beginning. I told them that there was a lot of viruses that I felt they were started, but they were never finished. And I felt that maybe if we could go back and dissect these, viruses and find out how they work, and I could make presentations and then just make spreadsheets and then, just break them up into sections, and then we could, maybe use different parts of this to make that. And then as a group, we could, I don't know, I guess I just make spreadsheets, I guess, or presentations.
One of the things you mentioned here is it's one that we often don't think about when we are trying to find that right fit for our particular professional role. Is there are people out there looking for many different kinds of skills? And the types of things you're telling me right now, I used to work for a next generation firewall company. We had an enormous group of people that all they did every day was take viruses, disassemble them, figure out how they're working, see what's going on inside of them, and create signatures that would be able to block them at multi-gigabit speeds going through these next generation firewall companies. So what I had no idea at that point there were even people doing that kind of thing. But I also got it. One of my earlier jobs in technology is I became effectively a technical marketer. I'm somebody who knew the technology, but they needed somebody to fly from city to city at these very large trade shows and tell the story of the things we were doing with the technology. And I said, well, hold on. I just get on a plane and I go to a hotel and I wake up in the morning and then I go talk to people and then I get on a plane and I go do the same thing over in another city. And they said, yes, that's exactly what we need. I said, that's a job? You pay people for that? Because that doesn't sound like a job. And they said, yes, that's what we want you to do. Up to that point, I had never considered that this type of thing that I did, there was actually a job for that people will pay you to do that type of thing. And I think the story you're telling is very common too. And a story that a lot of people have is these things you are learning in A+, in Network Plus, Security Plus. There are people out there who want those kinds of skills. And you may not even realize that the skills you have are skills that other people need. And if you aren't finding the right fit for those, just go from place to place to place to place to find those particular skills and the people who need them, and find that love connection, because there is someone out there who needs that type of capability. I think in your example, your ability to find that niche that nobody else was really serving was one that an employer said, hey, we could take advantage of. We could use those skills. We will pay you to be able to do that for us. And that's something that worked for you. If you were going to recommend for someone else to do a similar thing, what process would you give them? What advice would you give them to perform the same type of thing that you did?
Okay. Well, first of all, your mind must be tuned to a new pitch. You must change your posture. You have to become familiar with all of the tools. You have to understand that even if it's just like fixing a car and somebody gave you access to a shop, you have to understand that each tool serves a particular function. You can't use a hammer to fix the whole car.
You've obviously never seen me work on a car. You're absolutely right, because that's one of the things that we do run into in this industry. And one of the things I ran into very early, I worked as an operator with a bunch of people who worked in the mainframe. They taught me how to do particular things on the mainframe. And the mainframe would come down and they'd bring in the system analysts, and I would watch them work, and I would see them type very, very fast and do things on that mainframe that I didn't know were possible. But by seeing them do it, I feel like the perspective I had of the world got bigger in many ways. And I realized, like you were saying, there's many other tools out there available. I need to figure out how this works. Up to that point, I felt like I wasn't even considering it because I didn't know those existed, if that makes sense. Yeah,
and another thing about if you want to be working in security, I guess, don't do what I do. don't be very public. You should read the book The Art of War by Sun Tzu. It's all warfare is based on deception.
So true.
When you are able to attack, you must seem like you're unable. When using our forces, we must appear inactive. When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. And when we are far away, we must make them think we are close. Successful deception is to get into the enemy's mind. That's in the book, I guess.
I think what you're saying,
Yeah.
from a security perspective, at your level, being able to do that becomes extremely useful. IT security in general, you have to start thinking that way, or you're never going to figure out how to protect yourself from the people outside that are finding every possible way to get into your infrastructure and cause problems.
Yeah, because we like it fast, we like it hard hitting, and we like it clean. We instinctively love the idea of a fair play and even playing field. It's built up from childhood. You give the other guy an even break, play the game on the level. Don't hit a man when he's down. There's a 15-yard penalty for clipping, and the fighter who hits below the belt gets thrown over the ring. But in real life, that's not what's going to happen.
Nope.
You're going to get hacked.
Yep.
and you have to be ready for that. And when you step out of the gridiron into no man's land, the rule book is buried and forgotten. There are no penalties except the one for losing.
Luis,
And,
I think the process of thinking that way is probably the biggest challenge for most people to get over, especially when they're getting into security. I want to thank you for calling and giving us that little piece of advice. I think that's pretty valuable. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you, Professor.
Take care. And I think whenever you get into IT security, I mentioned many times that whenever you start looking at the security landscape, I say that you need a good foundation in networking. And you do, because most of what you're doing in IT security has a very strong foundation in all things network. And then we're layering on top of that a security piece. So we're putting on all of the things we need to know for security. And I often mention that as layering on top. But what we're really doing is expanding our perspective of what people can do across the network. Just as Luis was saying, is that you have to think about it from a completely different perspective now and understand what the bad guys could possibly do. We get a scope of that from things that are in the Network Plus exam objectives, understanding watering hole attacks. When we're looking at it in the exam objectives, that doesn't look like much of a thing. But in reality, that could be a significant attack that somebody's performing. We've seen this most recently with people trying to attack and influence elections in our countries, in all countries around the world. Those are significant things too. But everybody's going to try to take care of or try to attack based on where things are weak. And they know that those types of problems occur. You have to think about those. I also think about it as in the way of doing poker bluffs. There's many books written on poker bluffs where every philosophy from strong is weak to weak is strong. Those types of things come into play as well. And when you're dealing with humans and you're dealing with people that are trying to get something from you, those types of perspectives become very valuable as well. Well, I'm sorry we've gone another hour here, over our hour. I'm sorry we have to end things the way where it is right now. But if we don't, I will not be able to speak for at least another day. Just the nature of the beast and being able to make those things happen. I want to thank you for joining us. One of the things that we do every week is we do a study group. Sometimes we have a week off, but you can always find out when the next study group is going to be by going to our calendar at professormesser.com/calendar. I want to thank the folks for calling and joining us today. Thanks for being in the chat room and asking your questions here. Thanks for joining us in the first hour for the Q&A. That's always a lot of fun, and hopefully you were able to get something out of that you can use for your Security Plus studies as well. We look forward to seeing you on the next Security Plus study group. Thank you for joining us this time, and we'll see you next time on the Professor Messer Security Plus study group. Thanks, everyone.